Okay, let's try that again. Let's try that again, shall we? I was trying to hit start recording, and I literally just misclicked. The buttons are right next to each other. Can someone say Kefka, please? What the? Oh, I see what happened. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Spoilers Everywhere discussion. Now, here's how I do this. You'll notice we still do not actually have the chat up. Okay? I will put the chat up. Don't worry. Don't worry. But this is your big warning. You see, so I'm actually going to get rid of the spoilers thing. So we're not actually at spoilers yet. But as I just spent some time ranting for anybody who actually watched the previous video, thank you for watching, first of all. Second of all, the way I like to do these things is I like to give a non-spoiler opinion for like a minute or two before I start really opening the floodgate on spoilers. This is for people who are watching this on YouTube or watching this on the VOD as a kind of courtesy thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to spoil the crap out of Star Wars Episode 8, and as a consequence, every other Star Wars film in order to properly discuss it. This is the whole point of a discussion video. This is the whole point of a discussion stream, is to be able to discuss it as if you have actually already seen this work, and therefore, not just spoilers, but also mentioning is completely allowed and accepted, because it's the only way to properly do that. Okay? Nice, big, obvious warning there. Now, as I just said, I don't like to spoil things. I don't want to mention things. This is the weirdest song for this. This sounds like a good one, actually. Let's go ahead and mention something, because I know some people are okay with mentions before we get to spoilers. Again, leaving the chat off for just a second. So here's my mention, and my mention is that France is awesome. Thank you for joining us, the Half Angel. I hope you enjoy. It's sorry for my voice. I've been sick for the last about 9 days at this point. Mentioning the film. This is your last warning for me to mention the film, okay? I liked it. I did actually like the film. There were definitely some negative points, which I will discuss more in the spoilers section, and there were definitely some issues that I had with it. And but I do say the film overall was a massive net positive for me, and that's about all I'm going to really say about that. Mentioning wise, I do want to give a very small story, if you guys will. So, the movie was totally spoiled for me. Now you can probably tell by my grin that I don't mean this seriously, but let me pull this out here. So me and Third are walking up the staircase, going up to the theater, right? And there's this mother and her little kid, couldn't have been older than 4 or 5, going down. And the kid says, "I really like that part where all the people fought each other." And me and Third are like, "Oh no, the film's spoiled. There's a bunch of people fighting each other." Sorry, I had to share that. It was really cute. It was super cute. Now, I do have to also say one other thing, though, that is related to this topic. I actually did avoid all spoilers. I didn't avoid mentioning, like I just mentioned, several people were telling me how much they hated the film. This is the other thing I want to mention here. Lots of people, 7 people in the last week told me this, and I've seen other people. This is when I had to start doing my media blackout thing. Several people told me they absolutely despised this film. They thought it was worse than Episode 1, and that absolutely changed my opinion going into this. Because I have to admit, I am certainly one of the kind of people who is affected by pendulum effect as much as anybody else. So hearing that many people saying, "Oh, it was terrible. Oh, I hated it," it made me more positively inclined towards it and made me more willing to give it, credence just walking into it. I had only, by contrast, to give a little bit of perspective, I heard about 3 people on stream specifically saying that they liked it. That's it. So, that is a direct and literal example of how mentioning can change my impact and opinion of a film. Yeah, tons of negativity walking into it. In fact, the split right now between critics and fans on most sites is absolutely insane. I feel that now is a good time to switch up to here. All right, so we're finally going to bring up the spoilers thing. Bam! And actually, yes, we're going to leave the spoilers thing up. And we're finally going to bring chat back up. Bam! Welcome back, chat. I missed you. We are officially on spoilers alert. It is spoilers o'clock. We are no longer holding back on any goddamn thing. Okay? We're not holding back on so much as one word of spoilers. No, I have not, actually, Anthony, because I got home last night at like frickin' 2. I woke up today about 10 minutes before I streamed. I'm tired. I did very much like the film, except for the first act. First act was issues. First act were definite issues. The first act had some very serious pacing issues and some very serious, as strange as this is going to sound like, comedy issues. The pacing was just absolutely bizarre. Pretty much up until they finished, let's just call it what it is, the side quest on the casino planet. On not, oh god, I can't think of the name of Relay City. Up until they finished the side quest, like I said. Well, it's actually hard for me to keep up with chat. Yeah, pretty much the moment when they all got to the Dreadnought until the last bit of the film, which is actually about an hour, by the way. Big, long, very long film. 2.5 hours long. But pretty much from the moment they actually got, or not the Dreadnought, excuse me, pretty much from the moment they got to the Supremacy until the end of the film was very tight, very well paced, and basically awesome. I would actually go so far as to say that I have almost no actual complaints whatsoever about the last hour or so of the film. Like, none. It was great. It wasn't just good. First part, some issues. Now, I haven't actually said what any of those issues are yet. So, the biggest issue for me is probably the strangely comedic tone. Now, let me clarify this for a second. Because there are many different... basically, every Star Wars film has had comedic moments. That's not the problem. That's not the issue. Many Star Wars films have... Where's the... Oh, right. Many Star Wars films have had jokes. Many Star Wars films have had, comedic tone. That's not the problem. I mean, Rogue One was hilarious, right? The problem was, they did two big mistakes on jokes. One, they had too much of a reliance on jokes rather than actually comedy, if that makes any kind of a sense. And two, they would linger just a little bit too much on said jokes. That's the problem. And when you write comedy, you're always taking a risk because not everyone is going to find your jokes funny. And there's nothing that can be said. No, I do not have a cold. I've had bronchitis for the last 9 days. Whenever you're writing comedy, people aren't going to find it funny. That's just flat reality. And there's nothing that can be done for a joke that you don't find funny, right? I mean, this is like writing 101, is that whenever you're doing humor, you have to be careful with its application because some people just will not find it funny. And there's nothing that you can do about a joke that just isn't funny to a person. I don't mind the comedic tone. In fact, I'll even go so far as to say that there were several comedy moments that actually made me laugh. Quite a few, even. But that's my point. A lot of mixed bag stuff from the comedy. Yeah, the Poe Hux thing, I was laughing my ass off at that one. We will destroy the last remnants of the Republic. Yeah, sir, I'm looking for a Hux. General Hux, please, if you can put him on the line, thanks. We will crush every last one of your pathetic people, and there will be nothing left for you. Hux, kind of a tall, gangly-looking guy, red hair. Anybody? Can you hear me? That made me laugh like crazy. But then, oh God, I'm trying to think of another example. I don't remember a lot of the jokes that I didn't laugh at. There were several jokes that I was just looking at like, oh yeah, by the way, I wanted to save this for the spoiler section. Can I just segue for a second? We had like the worst audience I've ever had. I shouldn't say that. That's not true. I've had worse audiences. But there was... hang on. Mute! I've had worse audiences, but this one was bad. There was a moment... like, there were two moments where people applauded. I bet you can think of both of them. It wasn't quite that bad, Gary, but there was a moment where, after the hyperspace gun scene, you know what I'm talking about, a lot of people in the audience gave a verbal, audible reaction to that scene. And then someone in the front left row said something, and I'm actually not going to repeat for you because I don't like cussing and crudeness on my show. But it was basically, shut the... and continue that sentence for a little bit. Wanted to smack that guy. And of course, everyone just started to kind of shut up after that point, and nobody reacted anymore. And for the most part, there was no reactions in general. It was just weird. And it was just like, God, what the hell, people? Yeah, I wanted to slap that guy right in the frickin' face. I actually wanted to walk up to him and say, I'm sorry, you appear to be in the wrong movie. We're here to actually enjoy ourselves. If you would like to enjoy yourself, the door is right over there. You are more than welcome to go to it at your leisure. Please and thank you. Anyways. So. Yeah, I know, right, Hourglass? I don't want to hear enthusiasm for a movie I'm seeing in a theater. We were packed, by the way, shoulder to shoulder. Even though it was a Saturday evening showing. Opening weekend, I guess, right? For those of you aware, actually, this was actually the earliest showing I could get because they were sold out by the time I was able to buy tickets. Yeah, very packed. Anyways. So, true. Ooh, girl, true. If you prefer silence, you're in the wrong theater. I'm sorry. Opening weekend in the United States at a very popular film, you're going to get audience reactions. Now, it is worth noting that I do admittedly prefer a reactive audience. That adds to my enjoyment of a film. That's always been true for me. But there is a difference, it's worth noting, between a reactive audience and a loud audience. Gary mentioned earlier Public Enemies. We had a guy there who was just kind of chatting with his friend in a normal tone of voice and just playing on his phone. That's not a reactive audience. That's just being a dick. So there's a difference between being loud and being reactive. But anyways, let's talk about the goddamn film. Oh yeah, quiet moments, sure. In fact, I felt really bad because I kept having to cough at quiet moments, and I'm just sitting here like trying super hard not to make any noise. So, God, all right, where to start? Oh, you're right. That was the idiot who was flopping on the chairs. Oh, God, that was even worse than what I was remembering. Jesus Christ. Oh, that was terrible. So, God. Let me discuss my negatives first. That's what I wanted to do first. Give me a moment. I like to start with the bad. I've already given you one of the bad, the comedy, and I've given my reason why I think it was bad. You know, again, it's not just the fact that I don't want funny in my Star Wars because that's stupid. I mean, I actually laughed quite a bit during Rogue One and Force Awakens and so forth and so on. Like I said, I feel like they just didn't really have a handle on how to do that. And some of the jokes really did work for me. In fact, there was one joke where Rey and Solo and Kylo were being connected, and she said, "I'd really rather not do this right now." And he said, "Yeah, I'd really rather not either." And it cuts to him changing, and that actually got a chuckle out of me. I liked that one. I also liked the, hey, do you feel something? Do you feel it? Yes, I feel it right there. Do you feel the Force? Reach out, feel the Force. That made me laugh. But anyways, but again, that's going to vary from person to person, which is exactly my point that I was making earlier. That jokes are going to be hit or miss. What I find funny, you're not going to find funny necessarily, and vice versa. So I still say that they pushed a little bit too hard in the comedy perspective. I am happy about this, yes, Preacher. Super Leia didn't bother me at all, actually, but I'll get to that. So, second negative. I'm probably biased on this one because I'm a little bit of a ship guy and I'm a little bit of a tactics guy. But I really legitimately feel like the people who wrote the slow chase after the fleet scene have no idea how space works or ships or anything. That was I don't even know how to properly explain it, but that just pulled me completely out of the moment. It's like, oh, so they're just out of range, and the shots arc in space for some reason. I'm not even gonna get into that. And they're just staying just out of proper range, and the rear shields are just fine, and they're just gonna keep doing this for literally hours, for days, actually. I mean, I'm sorry, what? And as soon as we run out of fuel, yeah, we're just gonna fall backwards and get exploded. What? Like, I get the point. I get the idea that they were trying for this tense, almost submarine approach to that. Maybe it was 18 hours. I don't freaking know. I get that they were trying to do this tense moment thing, but it completely and utterly fell flat for me. So much so that it's probably one of the biggest things that pulled me out of the film, even more than the comedy thing I mentioned earlier. It was like, it felt like a parody of a battle scene. It felt like something that I would see in Spaceballs. Well, we can't quite catch up to them. All right, just keep following them. What? I mean, okay, I guess, whatever. Yeah, it felt like a spoof. And yeah, I mean, for God's sakes, okay, so I'm sorry. I've actually done tactical analyses of Star Wars. I'm a geek. What do you want from me? Why not send someone on a micro jump forward? Micro jumps are a real thing in canon. Just send one. You had how many Star Destroyers? You don't have to rely on the frickin' Supremacy. It's a piece of crap ship anyways. Just send one of your destroyers in a micro jump forward, turn around, and come back. I'm still thinking on a 2D plane, for God's sakes. I mean, for crying out loud, really? That's another thing. I'm sorry. They bring in this dreadnought at the beginning of the film, which is already kind of stupid. It's just like, here's this dreadnought. What is it? Well, it's a really dumb ship. It's basically a space platform that has gun and turret towers, a bunch of fighters, and artillery guns. For some reason, it needs to be the side of a frickin' SSD. What? And then we got the Supremacy, which I've been making fun of ever since they first revealed it, with the broad-winged... The Supremacy is Snoke's ship. The really broad-winged bomber-looking thing, right? Which is this really broad-looking bomber-looking thing, which looks dumb and is ridiculously, enormously huge. You know what? I can and have spent some time really dissecting how stupid the Supremacy is. I'm just going to summarize myself for a second. It's stupid. Moving on. Again, I'm just going to move on from that because it was stupid. Yeah, it's like 60 kilometers wide or some ridiculous thing. I mean, God's sakes, why would you? Whatever, whatever. I'm moving on, moving on. So, moving on. Let's talk about the next thing. Hang on. So I've talked about that. We talk about the third thing that bothered me about this film. The third thing I would consider a definitive negative. Admiral Holland. Now, I'm just going to stop there because I want to see everyone in chat's thoughts before I continue. Me and my sister had, and my friend had a barely civil argument about Admiral Holland after the film finished. Holdo, apparently. Admiral Purple Hair. I don't freaking know her name. So, Admiral Purple Hair. I'm just reading chat. I'm noticing a lot of people agree with me on this. I'll go and give my opinion on that now. I mean, obviously, because I said it was a negative. Now, let me make this clear. I don't actually dislike the Admiral herself. That kind of a harsh line commanding character is hard to pull off properly, and they didn't do a terrible job of it. What pissed me off is the artificial drama of the situation. From an out-of-character perspective, there's only one reason. Now, I'm going to be as fair as I can about this. There's only one reason to go ahead and have her not just explain her goddamn plan. To not just say, all right, we need to hold out for this reason. To not just do this. Now, as my sister had pointed out, obviously she did actually have to explain that plan to several people. Because they were already fueling up the transports and they were already getting ready for that, right? Like, that was a thing. They were doing that. So it's not like she wasn't talking to some people. She had to have been. She was giving orders, but she never said anything to that to us, the audience. And there's only two reasons for that. One is something I'll get into much later. It has to do with Poe's character arc. But the more important part is because drama. Drama, right? I don't need additional drama in a film that I'm already legitimately tense about. You had good tension in this film. You don't need to have some character butting horns kind of a character between Twitface and Dudeface. Poe. I shouldn't call Poe Dudeface. Poe was cool. Actually, I was assuming the entire time, Carbon, that she was in fact the spy that they were tracking through. I also know that I am not the only person who had that perspective. I know I'm not the only person who assumed that. In fact, I've seen a few people in chat assume that she was in fact the traitor. Now, if there actually was a traitor on board, her decision to not inform people would have made a lot more sense. But that isn't it. They're just tracking them with this new super tech, which, by the way, is this whole other thing. It's brand new technology that actually bypasses basically the rules of the setting. Yeah, her not telling Poe is at least understandable. Her not telling us, again, drama. You can change my mind on this. Like, there are ways it can be explained and talked around and maybe trying to make this work. You know, maybe it's part of his character arc. Maybe it's part of this understanding. Maybe it's done for this in-character reason. But not letting the audience know that she's up to something is just there to create artificial... You know what? I'm sorry. I am using the wrong term. I apologize. It wasn't drama. It was melodrama, which I can't stand in my fiction. God damn, I've had enough melodrama in real life. I don't need you to insert into my goddamn fiction. Moving on. Final thing I didn't like about the film. This is... I didn't like the CGI on Yoda. Now I'm phrasing that. I know, right, Broadway? I'm phrasing that very carefully because I actually liked the Yoda scene a lot. But the CGI on Yoda actually bothered me. That was a puppet? Bull crap, that was a puppet. I'm looking that up right now. Yoda looked terrible. Let me just say that. I mean, goddamn, I automatically assumed it was CGI because it looked so goddamn terrible. He looked like a freaking cartoon. He looked like the freaking Yoda from Episode 2, which I don't like his appearance there at all. Of course, this is going to tell me. I'll have to take your word on this. This isn't telling me, and I don't feel like researching this right now. Wow. Anyway, so Yoda looked terrible. Sorry. Apparently, the Yoda physical puppet looked terrible. I'm sorry. Can I make a point really quick? Because I've looked at Empire Strikes Back recently, and Puppet Yoda, the one from Empire Strikes Back, still looks good. Now. 35 years later. Just making the point. Anyways, moving on. That's it. Those are my big negatives. He did look better than Phantom Menace, but that's not anything. That's not saying anything. Hang on. Give me just a moment. I'm going to use my toothpicks here to make a Yoda that looks better than the one the Phantom Menace. Here we go. There we go. Kill you I will. Yes. One with the Force you will be. I'm being facetious, but I absolutely despise the one from the original Phantom Menace, the theater release of Phantom Menace. So I loved Kylo Ren. Let me just go ahead and say my favorite part of this film by an absolutely gargantuan margin is Kylo Ren. The actor did amazing stuff with his face. He did that in the last film too, but it's way better in this one. He was absolutely phenomenal. Oh my God. Huge, like massively positive part of the story. Holy crap. And he was complex too. I liked that. He wasn't just evil. He wasn't just good. He did let his emotions get the better of him. Blah, 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 blah. Very, very good job of Kylo Ren in this film. Yeah, Hux did some good... Hux actually was surprisingly good in this film. And not just as the comedic thing earlier I mentioned. Oh, you know what? There's actually one other thing I don't like about this film. But that's a personal preference thing, not a the film was bad thing. One of the things that irritates me in fiction is when there's a group of people who are like, we just need to keep going on. We just need to keep fighting. We just need to survive and then we'll win. And then they do. Right? That actually irritates me in fiction. Yes, Star Wars has done that before. I'm the kind of person who looks at it and say, okay, let's say you beat the big bad guy. Now what? Let's say you destroy the leaders of the First Order. Now what? Do you have any kind of plan for how you're going to deal with this? Do you have any kind of plan for actual coordinated resistance? It's nice to think that one person defiantly fighting against odds can make a difference, and sometimes they can. But God damn it, you need to think about what you're doing. The film had that all over the place. One of the moments that really got to me is when she releases the not horse into the wilds, into the fields. And she says, now it was worth it. And I look at that, I'm thinking, you realize they're just going to go recapture that guy in like 20 minutes, right? Like, you realize where they've been getting these for their horse races, right? You did nothing. You accomplished nothing. And that actively irritates me. And towards the end of the film, Leia, goddamn Leia has a line, we have all we need for the rebellion right here. Bull crap. Think about it. It's not like her statement isn't valid. They do have the need and the possibility of actually making this happen, but none of that is stated. It just sounds like, somehow things will work out. Oh, come on. Yeah, they have no fleet. They have no army. They have no funding. They have nothing except each other. Now, that can work. And we were just talking about in Yakuza 0 how one of the most dangerous things is people who have nothing left to lose. You can do something with that, but none of that was ever stated. It was just, we have all we need on the Falcon. What? That was a good scene. Anyways. All right, so let's try to go through here chronologically a little bit here. Resistance, not rebellion, whatever. They both start with R and they're the same thing. I know, right, Darkstar? I'll talk about it. So let's talk about an aggregate. Sorry, I'm still not going through chronologically. Let's talk about the themes of the film. Now, I obviously did already tell you one of the big themes of the film, because it's actually something that irritated me. But one of the other major themes of the film, I'm reading chat, I swear, it's just, I can't respond to all of you. Holy crap. We've got a lot of viewers right now. One of the main themes of the film that I really did like is that people can do what person can't. There was a lot of that all over the place. There's a lot of ideas about how, one person cannot rise against tyranny, but 12 can, right? I can't do anything, but I can inspire you to do something, and we could do something, right? That was actually a pretty well done theme. It's actually tied into the previous theme I just mentioned, unfortunately. Thank you, Zelda. And I do feel like that was well done in several circumstances. They also did some good stuff with the theme of basically leadership and doing things for the right reasons. Because the first few, in pretty much the entire first half of the film, a lot of people are willing to man up and make the hard choices and die to not really accomplish anything. We will do this. We will do this one long suicide run. Nope, you're dead, and we move on. I mean, how many people died to kill that one dreadnought? Right? I do actually like that, because that is ultimately not a winning strategy. Not really. If you're trying to do that kind of a thing, you have to make sure you're A, doing it for the right reason, and B, you're very, very careful in particular about your tactics. If you're just flinging people to kill other people, you need to be making sure you're getting a hell of a return on those deaths. I mean, the entire concept of we're going to make them pay for every inch in blood can work. But only if you're doing it right, So, for example, that dreadnought seems like a huge loss to the First Order. But how many other dreadnoughts do they have? Better question. How much does that dreadnought mean to the First Order? How much do they care if they lose a dreadnought? For a little bit of... this is actually basic economics, really. It's all about valuation. How much did those people who died in the fighters matter to the resistance? How much did those bombers that died to take out that dreadnought matter to the resistance? They can build more dreadnoughts. Can you build more bombers? Right? This is not a complaint, by the way. This is great. Now, the supremacy was a significant loss. And that's actually interesting in its own right. And that's one of the reasons I like the theme. It would be so easy. Exactly, Carmen. It would be so easy to have that theme of, failure, basically, of sacrifice to accomplish, be petty, right? To be insignificant. And yet you'll notice that as I was just talking, I've been talking about for the last like 10 minutes here, you can make sacrifice matter. You just have to be careful about it. Just don't blindly throw away your lives in blind resistance, in blind open rebellion. You need to be very careful and cautious and precise and surgical with your resistance. And I could give you 2 examples of how they do that properly in this film. One is Admiral Purplehair, and one is Luke frickin' Skywalker. Because Admiral Purplehair sacrificed her life and their main capital ship for a significant gain. The salvation of however many trips she could save and the destruction of the supremacy. That's a valid trade right there. That is careful, considered resistance. Luke Skywalker laying down his life in order to buy them time to get out, in order to completely stall an overwhelming force, in order to do this. That was value, careful resistance, because it's even better because it's put right alongside Finn's attempt at sacrifice. Now, let me admit, I thought Finn was going to die in that scene. I really did. I really thought Finn was going to die, and that was going to be a great, powerful moment. But if you really think about it, it wouldn't have actually really saved them, would it? It wouldn't have bought them all that much time. Might not have even destroyed the cannon. They would have still had the AT-ATs. They would have still had the ship and Kylo Ren. There's a very good chance they still would have killed them. Finn was going to die for no reason. It was going to be another pointless, fruitless sacrifice. Luke tanked, to use the MMO term. Luke stood up there and tanked the entire force. I want every gun we've got firing on them. You notice Luke was deliberately wearing, or I should say projecting, the outfit that he used to wear back in the flashback, right? Specifically to provoke Kylo Ren. He had a freaking aggro aura on, for God's sakes. Luke tanked so that they could get out. Like I said, worthwhile sacrifice. Lore Mom asking what I thought of the film. Yeah, the Falcon, thank you. I actually forgot about that for a second. The Falcon also tanked. Pulled all those fighters off. I actually agree, Elmeric. I feel like they have no idea how to do a galactic scale. It's really sad when Return of the Jedi makes us feel like we're having galactic super fleets fighting each other more than a film that came out years later. I mentioned that earlier when it comes to the whole tension chase scene. Yeah, they even called it out in the film, yeah. They really hate that ship. Luke planning to kill Kylo as a child was awesome. God damn, that was awesome. Luke is not a legend. I'm saying this wrong. Luke is not perfect. Let me phrase my sentence more carefully. Luke is not perfect. He's a guy. We had 3 movies of Luke learning how to even begin to deal with him. And when Luke finally went up against Vader and the Palpatine, he was utterly unprepared. He got freaking lucky, and the person who won that encounter at the end of Return of the Jedi was freaking Anakin Skywalker, not Luke. I'm not saying Luke wasn't involved, but you get my point, right? Now, I've always liked that part of Luke. It's one of the things I liked about a lot of the EU, is that Luke was always portrayed as just a kid, basically, who was trying to make it up as he goes, who had all this responsibility and power thrust on him, and is good-hearted, and wants to do the best he can. But he's just a guy. I especially love the way Mark Hamill narrated his version of the scene the third time. First Kylo, second time Kylo gives his perspective. Third time, though, That was the powerful moment. That was the awesome moment. The moment where Luke talks about it. And again, Mark Hamill sells this. I saw this darkness. I saw this future. I saw the death of all I loved. And for just a second, for just 1 second, it made so much sense. But then, like a fainted shadow, it passed. But it was too late. Yeah, it was instinctual, but he hesitated because Luke is not a horrible person. Luke is not the kind of person who could murder his nephew like that. And again, Mark Hamill really sold that scene so well. Yeah, one fleeting moment of doubt. I wish he hadn't Roximus. I'll talk about that more in depth later, though. Yeah. No, it does make sense that he would panic when faced with a second Vader. Now, I think Luke would do that, my opinion. Specifically the lightsaber thing, not the cranky old man thing. Again, I actually do think a lot of the power of Luke's scenes rests on Mark Hamill's acting talents. The man is a very good actor, especially with his voice. And it's funny because so many of those scenes were actually had weight added to them because he was narrating them. You noticed that, right? Speaking of which, by the way, just really quick subtle thing. Did you notice when he goes to tank them right at the end when he's projecting himself? He was leaving no footprints. Very nice touch. It's not called attention to until the movie, reveals what's happening, until Kylo figures it out. But the whole time, if you're looking, it's like he's not leaving any footprints. Brilliant. Brilliant. Anyways. Excuse me. Now let's talk about old man Luke. Let's talk about cranky Luke. I'm not sure what to really say about that because it felt to me, this is just my impression, I want to make that clear, but it felt to me that Luke, cranky Luke, was basically like, first of all, probably has no social skills left at all. Let's just make that clear. But the kind of person who really just wants this person to leave, right? Like, he was very rude to Rey, very crude to Rey, and basically just trying to be as unpleasant as possible with the deliberate purpose of trying to get her to leave, right? In other words, I think that actually worked for me because, yeah, he was kind of pulling a Yoda. He was pushing her. Now, Yoda was pushing Luke specifically to test him. I got the impression Luke was pushing Rey to get her the hell out of Dodge. It's like, go away. You're not changing my mind on this. Leave me alone. I will also say that it makes perfect sense to me that Luke would try to push her away. As someone in chat saw earlier, yeah, exactly. Nice mask. As someone in chat pointed out, yeah, no kidding. Is someone trying to put out? God damn it, I'm losing my train of thought. Okay, excuse me. What was I saying? God damn it, I've completely lost my thought. That really hurt me. Um, Luke, right. So I don't know. I don't actually have anything else to add with him. Uh, I did actually notice that Dark Star. Hey, do you see where it went, Burnus? I could use it really quick. I don't think Rey learned anything from Luke in the direct sense of the word, but I do think Rey's interaction with Luke did teach her a lot, if that makes any sense. But I'll get to more of that later because that's tied into another topic. Um, what was I going to say? Do I think Kylo Ren can be redeemed now? Yes, but not in the strictest sense of the word. I don't think Kylo Ren can turn now. I think Kylo Ren could be a positive impact on the universe now, or the galaxy now. I think that's a better way to put that. I know, right, Darkrai? No, you're absolutely right. By the way, one thing I do have to say that I really liked about Luke is that he's doing the same thing Yoda did. And I know that sounds horrible, but I do kind of like the direction they're going with the story. Luke flat out says the Jedi Order was wrong, right? They made mistakes. They screwed up. And this is something I've been pushing for so long. It feels like I've been doing this for like 17 years at this point. I've been pushing the idea of, the Jedi Order being the bad guys. I know it was never actually the original intent. I know that for certainty now. And I know that most of that has come from other writers walking into Star Wars. But the Jedi Order has been responsible for so much garbage over and over and over again across the course of everything. Well, it's true. I don't agree with narrow, dogmatic views of the Jedi. Oh, sorry. But I don't. I don't agree with it. I never have. And the acknowledgement of the failures of the Jedi Order, and I'm going to keep stressing that very clearly. The Jedi Order is something that I like that he brought up and that he acknowledged, and he said, we need this to end. When they said that line in the trailer, it's time for the Jedi to end, do you remember my analysis of that? Because the first thing I said was, yes, awesome, absolutely, the Jedi Order needs to end. I agree. Yeah, if the Jedi die, the light dies. That's vanity. Great quote. Love that. And yeah, he even hesitated trying to save the tree. It was Yoda who ended up saying, yeah, all right. Now, let me go ahead and say that almost the entire film, except for maybe like 5 minutes of it, was building up to this idea of abandoning the old and establishing the new. Yes, I did notice that, Corrales. You should have heard the audience. That's one of the time when the audience was like, oh, it's the books, But yeah, right at the end of the film, they went back on it. Just out of nowhere. That actually bothered me a little bit. Now, that could be written around. That could be explained around. But thematically, emotionally, it felt like at the end they were like, oh, by the way, the Jedi will continue. What? You did this whole thing establishing how this cycle that Star Wars has been in for literally 10,000 years has been wrong. Has been bad. Why suddenly go back with that? Now, that being said, it is possible that that's just the visual presentation, the musical presentation, and that it may actually literally be a thing where they are still going to get rid of the old. And we'll see what happens with the new. Because there's a reason I keep saying the Jedi Order needs to die. Now, they don't say that in the film. But it's possible that they are making the distinction between the Jedi Order and the Jedi, as I have been doing for many years. Again, that's why I keep trying to state my statement very clearly today. That the Jedi Order needs to burn. That the Jedi Order needs to die. But not the Jedi. So this could be explained away. They didn't present it that. Like, the impression that the film was trying to give was, no, the Jedi will live on. And the impression the film gives is that Kylo Ren will continue forward with the Empire. That's the impression that the film was giving very strongly. And I've asked several people about that, and several people in chat I've noticed have been agreeing with me. Is that, the Empire will go on, and the Sith will go on, and the Light Jedi will go on, and the Resistance will go on. And it's like, even if that's not actually true, that is clearly the impression the last 10 minutes of the film gave. Oh yeah, by the way, there's one thing that was very understated in the film. Not a lot of attention was drawn to it, but it was a very powerful moment. Luke cut himself off from the Force. Luke did that. That was powerful. And what's funny is there were a few hints of that too. Rey keeps sensing things or feeling things, and he wasn't noticing anything. Right? Yeah, it was just slid that right under the rug. Exactly, Corrales. That's why he didn't feel Han dying. Oh, speaking of which, that line, where's Han? Oh, that hurt. That hurt. Yeah. I haven't ranked this one yet, Dark Angle. I'd really like to see it again before I do so. By the way, this film is an excellent example of why I use the concept of the net positive. Because there are some things in this film that actually bothered me, as I mentioned earlier. But there's also some things in this film that were freaking amazing, as I think I'm making my gushing clear about. Let's talk about the side quest. I'd really like to talk about the side quest. I want to save Snoke and Rey and Kylo. Those are the three big things I want to talk about last. I want to build up to those because the whole film is gravitating around that concept. Yeah, looking at the twin suns, that was good. Anyways, let's talk about the side quest. What the hell was up with the side quest? I'm sorry. It wasn't all bad. There was actually some good stuff there. But I remember having the thought in the theater as I'm sitting there, because I'm a wide guy, so, I have to really squinch myself up to not bother the people sitting next to me. So I'm sitting there like this in the film, and I'm thinking, well, I'm really happy that you guys bothered to ensure that a lot of other, concept artists and art designers and CGI effects and set designers continue to have jobs. But why is this here? Narrative. I keep calling it a side quest because that's how it felt. It was just woo. What? Yeah, the side quest felt off, just generally off, and it's not even necessary. I can't even say it was bad. Right? Like I can't say the side quest was actively bad because it wasn't. There were a few issues, but it just felt like it was like, all right, here, what? Now, I agree with that, Carbon. Did they? Oh, they did. No, you're right. They didn't call him a slicer. I thought about that. I have to admit, I was hoping the slicer was Lando Calrissian. And I have to admit, that would have probably been bad if it actually was. Let's just be honest. If that was actually Lando Calrissian, that probably would have been a bad thing. But that was who I was hoping it would be, to be completely honest. Now, Rose and Finn were great. The two had a lot of great chemistry, great interactions on screen. It was fantastic to see two low-level, low-tier nobodies interacting with each other in a Star Wars film. I actually want more of that in my Star Wars, to be completely honest with you. So, huge positive from Finn and Rose. That was great. I love that. One of the other, there were a lot of other little tiny bits they did, which were actually really good. Roximus asked me to comment on DJ, the stuttering Benicio del Toro character. Now, I liked him. He was an interesting take on what is usually the Han Solo character, but he wasn't a Han Solo character. Because he wasn't, a jerk with a heart of gold. He was a mercenary. Like a pure mercenary mindset, out for myself kind of a guy. And he wasn't like fully convicted in it, or he wasn't convinced in it. He wasn't even like super evil. There's even this great bit later on when he sells him out. He's like, "Oh, you today you kill them, tomorrow they kill you." And Finn says, "Not this time," and he says, "Maybe." Just there was something wonderful about that. Excuse me. And I loved the bit where he didn't die. He had a ship. He got out before the hyperspace hit. There was a bit where he's showing off the things, Like, all right, so... Hey, it looks like they're selling weapons to the Resistance, too. And that's actually that even fits smoothly into continuity, because for those of you who don't remember, the Republic, back when it was still, fully functional and not just been destroyed, was actually dumping a whole lot of money onto the Resistance. So it makes sense that the Resistance had been dumping a whole lot of money on weapons dealers. Now, I have no idea where the hell the First Order gets their money. That's actually something that irritates me, is the First Order seems to have an absolutely ludicrous amount of resources and money for no explanation. Yes, all of this goes up to YouTube, Tyler Meyer. But ignoring that niggle, that's a niggle with the future stuff in general. It bothers me how the First Order is as functional it is when it shouldn't be. Whatever. I'll let that go. But I still did I know, the First Order has more money than the freaking Galactic Empire did. And the Galactic Empire had a fleet of 25,000 strong ISDs. Do you know how much that freaking costs? Anyways. I'll let that go. So, yeah, I liked Rose. I liked Finn. I always love Finn. He's a great character. I liked there was one scene between the two of them. It was an obvious scene. It was very obvious. It was very blatant, but it was still good, if that makes any sense. It was a scene where Finn is talking about how awesome this city is and how great it is. And there's these fantastic aliens and this great architecture and all this. This is so cool. And she says, "Look closer." Now, I caught that the moment she said, we're going to a hive of scum and villainy. And again, it's this beautiful, beatific planet, because I've studied real-life history, and I study fiction for a living. But I do still like that perspective of the whitewashing. Not white, that's the wrong term. The surface level. Nice, clean, shiny. Bunch of bugs and grit and other terrible, horrible, disgusting stuff just under that. I did like how they did that. I actually was predicting politicians versus veneer. Thank you. The veneer of cleanliness. Yeah, Coruscant is a fantastic example of this. Coruscant is this beautiful, amazing, gorgeous planet that is a crust on top of a whole lot of rot. I hate all politicians. There we go. Got it out of the way. Phew. Oh, okay, we're good. I've gone through a whole soundtrack talking about this. Hang on, let me find another soundtrack. Who likes Secret of Mana? Anybody? So, but I did like that. I do feel that overall section dragged a little bit too much. It very much did feel like they basically needed Finn, who was a main character, and Rose, who was connected to him, to actually do something, and they couldn't think of anything else to do. That very much felt like what they were going with the side quest, and that did bother me. I did be like I get that you're world building and I get that you're character establishing, but I feel like something else could have either been done to either add to that. I know that sounds heretical, but add to that to make it more cohesive and fit in better, or do something else with the characters, right? Moving along. So everyone's talking about Phasma. Let's talk about Phasma. She was in this movie? God, I didn't even notice. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. One of the most interesting things about Phasma is that she's this incredibly Boba Fett character. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, she's very popular. She's very deadly. And she doesn't get a lot of screen time. At all. Very Boba Fett. Now, I do think there were two cool things about Phasma in this film. Number one, the fight between her and Finn was actually pretty cool. I did like that. Number two, I hope you noticed this. Her armor actually works. Anyone else catch that? How many years have we been watching stormtroopers and clone troopers and First Order troopers get shot and fall over? And she gets shot and it goes, whook. And it actually deflects the shot. I know that sounds like a really weird thing to pick up on, but it was one of the first things I noticed. I was like, oh my God, she has armor. Holy crap. That was great. I do feel like she was incredibly misused here. I feel like they could have done a lot more with her. The fact that her characterization is basically incredibly stereotypically evil character is actually kind of not depressing, discouraging. I mean, God's sakes. She comes out and she's like, all right, now that we've killed them, we're going to take our time and show them the traitor. And now that we've taken our time to show the traitor, we're going to let him go his way. Oh, hey, it looks like they told the truth. All right, now that we've taken our time to show the traitor to see if he verified and showed the truth and showed them the helplessness, now we're going to go and have you executed. But now that we've taken the time to show the traitor, to show the truth, to show the execution, we're not going to do the execution quickly. You know, it was like every typical evil bad guy thing from the frickin' Dudley Do-Right era that she was doing. It's like, come on. You are a more interesting character than this, Phasma. At least you should be. Do something. Cool fight, though. Actually, one thing I did kind of like about the fight, you notice she had a blaster the whole time while she was dueling Finn. Like, as soon as anyone else shot at her, she pulled out the blaster, shot back, and then went back to dueling Finn. So, anyways. So I talked about the side quest. I talked about that. Before I conclude with my big things, because there are some big things I want to talk about, let's talk about the ending. So, I know all of you caught the force grab of the broom from the kid. I know all of you caught that. Where do you think they're going with that? Like, why do that? And I know that sounds like a weird thing, but it's a weird direction to go in the middle of a trilogy. That's the kind of scene that would usually happen at the end of the third, like at the end of a third trilogy. That's the thing that's usually supposed to establish the new story arc. Doing that in the middle of the trilogy feels very weird. Now, I agree with what several people are saying in chat. This is probably the establishment of the new trilogy. We already know they're working on, or one of the other Gaiden movies, which we already know they're working on, or one of the other Gaiden books, which they're actively working on. But again, out of nowhere, just and then, At this point, I'm actually not sure I even have any predictions for Episode 9. They have done so much to basically reset the board in episode 8 that it's hard to even predict episode 9 at this point because we've kind of got a blank paper situation. Nice big blank sheet of paper. It's like, well, okay. Now, I do like the nobody thing. I haven't really talked about the Rey as a nobody thing yet, but I do like that. And I do agree that the movie absolutely had the idea in general that you don't need to be some big, wonderful, powerful bloodline to be super powerful in the Force. Oh, and they also never mentioned the word midichlorians. You notice that? There were several moments where they could have easily slid that into conversation. They never did. Just a little thing to mention there. I'm predicting a time skip as well. In fact, I'd be astonished if we didn't have a time skip in episode 9. I'd be amazed if they don't. Because the only way they could pull off an episode 9, my opinion, the only way they could pull off an episode 9 without a time skip is to have episode 9 finish clearing the board, you know? Like, in other words, have episode 9 end with basically a loss. And then have that be the new status quo for future films. Also, I'm sorry, I didn't actually talk about this, but I am a little bit surprised Leia Organa survived this film. I was not expecting that. I don't agree with that, actually, Corrales. That was a good lesson. Superman Leia didn't bother me. Like, it looked weird, but it didn't bother me. Possibly Mariah Cole, but at the same time, Rey's kind of already been fulfilling that. Remember, Luke cut himself off from the Force for a while there. Rey is the one who kind of naturally rose in reaction to that. Leia's Force powers. So let me go ahead and say that the Leia Force power thing only bothers me because of the fact that, you know, the visual presentation of it, I suppose. But the act itself didn't bother me at all. Here's the thing. I haven't read the AU stuff. I'm not big in the AU. I'm actually going to continue deliberately keeping myself out of the AU stuff. But it makes perfect sense to me in the way my head works that someone powerful in the Force with no training, you know, with no understanding of the Force, who was not a full-fledged Jedi, could, in an emergency moment, as a survival mechanism, call upon the Force to an extensive degree. That makes sense to me. My opinion. Like, it's the whole lifting something very heavy off your foot kind of a thing, right? Just adrenaline, go, you know, right? That makes sense to me, that someone who has Force sensitivity, who has the Force, could do something like that when she's literally been ejected out of freaking airlock, or, you know, equivalent, right? So that made sense to me. And you'll notice, if you were paying attention, it didn't seem to be a deliberate thing on her part. It's not like she was like, oh, I've got this. Her eyes were closed, and her hand was just kind of twitching, and it just kind of started happening, and then her eyes open as it's already happening. So again, I think that was more of an instinctual, oh God, kind of a thing. Poor Admiral Akbar. Yeah, I did notice Admiral Akbar died, by the way. I don't know what they're doing with Leia in the next film. They had plans, and then Carrie Fisher died. Speaking of which, moment of silence for Carrie Fisher. She was an awesome character and an awesome actress. And a fantastic script doctor. There's about a 99% chance that if you've ever watched a film, you have probably actually seen her writing capacity in script doctoring. It's one of the things she was best at. Yeah, exactly, next time. So, anyways. Yeah, it's really weird because they weren't exactly shy about showing new aliens, were they, Carbon? I mean, God's sakes, they had a lot of aliens in this film. Not yet, no, Volcanto. It's very large. It's like 300 lines of text. I haven't got to that. You never heard of a script doctor? It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. They take a raw script, a draft, and they make it good. Polishing dialogue, making scene transitions make more sense, all that kind of stuff, right? Carrie Fisher was one of the best script doctors in Hollywood. This is not just my opinion. Many, many people have given this opinion before she died, so we can say it was without bias. She was a truly amazing script doctor. It's kind of like how Mark Hamill got so well known as a voice actor specifically. She went into that field and just owned it. Anyways, let's talk about Snoke. Now, I have to admit something. I have two types of reactions. Anybody who knows me knows I think a lot and very quickly in advance. I usually tend to predict things without really meaning to. Anybody who recently watched my Yakuza 0 premiere run knows I'm pretty good at predicting things thanks to narrative law. Let me go ahead and say that I didn't see the Snoke thing coming until about a minute before. Like when they started walking into the room and they're talking about their joint future, and I'm like, oh God, they're going to do it. And then they did. I did something that I almost never do in a film. And this is, so I like to react to a film, right? I've mentioned that before. But usually those reactions are measured. You know, I have the reaction internally, and then I think, okay, how should I say this? And how should I express this? You know, if the audience is quiet, I'll just keep it to myself. If the audience is loud or reactive or answering, then I'll go ahead and react out loud. It's an extreme rarity that I will react without first throttling that and filtering how I should react physically to what I'm already reacting to mentally and emotionally. I say this to make this very, very careful, very, very clear that when Snoke was chopped in half, was pretty much exactly what happened in my chair. Just, yes, God, yes. I was very happy about that. I was so happy that they pulled that off and they did that. It was so great. And then like a few seconds later, the rest of my audience, oh, dude, Rory, I've been sick for 9 days. Dude, come on. Hang on. This is getting stupid. Apparently no one watches my streams. I've been sick for 9 days, damn it. There. Okay. Anyways, so I loved it. I love that. Now, let me go ahead and say, I really hope Snoke stays dead. I really do. I hope he stays dead and never comes back in the films. I want to stress that point. Now, what I want is for us to explain what the hell is going on with Snoke in the past, in the books, in novelization. You remember? I was actually going to use that exact same parallel, Darkrai. You remember Palpatine, the guy whose name we didn't even know in the original trilogy? Palpatine didn't become a character until years later, until we got his backstory. Hell, we still didn't even really know the full story of Palpatine until the frickin' prequel trilogy came out. So I think we will learn more about Snoke in backstory. Because there is one thing I want to know about Snoke a lot, and that is, why is this guy so goddamn powerful? I know it's a weird thing to pick on, but why is he so powerful? So overwhelmingly powerful. The films, both Force Awakens and Last Jedi, have gone way out of their way to explain how strong Kylo is and how strong Rey is. And then Snoke is just super stronger than both of them. Just absolutely curb stomps both of them without effort. Why is he so freaking powerful? It's the one and only thing that bothers me about that. Now, that being said, I know this is going to be... Yeah, exactly, Darkrai. He was stupid strong. I'm going to get rid of this. I was just joking. I, that being said, I don't need more of Snoke in the movies at all. He has, in my opinion, completely served his purpose. Like, he has actually showcased, he's done everything he needed to do. He has served his purpose for Kylo, and he has served his purpose for Rey, and he is now, he was a stupid Sith. He was the embodiment of stupid Sith. He might actually qualify better than frickin' Darth Malak did. And Darth Malak has been my poster child for stupid Sith for years. So Snoke was just, yeah, he was even slimy and creepy about it, right? He's just lounging around in this gold bathrobe. And he is lounging too. Props to whoever was doing the motion capture. I don't know if Andy Serkis was doing all the motion capture in this film. But he was just casually, yep, completely arrogant. Excuse me, idiot Sith. I prefer stupid Sith because it's easier for me to say right now. So it was Andy Serkis. No surprise that Andy Serkis is an amazing motion capture actor. So yeah, his visual body language was exactly what it needed to be. And there's even this great bit where he's just lounging around and he's just casually walking and talking. And you could just see him portraying the rich snob, right? You know what I mean, right? Just the guy who has tons of money and is a slimy git about it. And then there was the bit where Kylo stands up to him and just effortlessly, bam! This huge blast of lightning just... Snoke was perfect in this film, in my opinion. He was the literal physical embodiment of everything that is wrong with the Sith mentality. And he's frickin' dead. Depends on the specific instance, Ulmerich, but I do think the idea of stupid Sith is something that should absolutely exist within the story of Star Wars. Absolutely. And I even loved that bit because I'm watching the scene, and of course, it's kind of pulling the Return of the Jedi thing, right? Yeah, rotting evil. Great way to put that. And it's this whole bit, and what I'm looking at this like, okay, I'm not sure. For once, I wasn't 100% sure how exactly they were going to play it, right? I mean, there's no way Kylo Ren is going to turn to the good, and Rey is probably not going to turn to the dark, even though I actually wanted that to happen. But then they talk about their shared vision of the future, and they walk into that, I'm like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're going to actually kill off Snoke. Dude. And then, I can feel it. He is reaching out. It was great. He's reaching out, yes, with his lightsaber. And now, he's going to strike against his true enemy. Now, I've talked about Snoke. Let's talk about Kylo and Rey. Let's talk about the main characters of this film. Oh no, absolutely, Carmen. Snoke was smart, he was just stupid Sith. Agreed, Spirit of Memory. Let me just say, I wanted Rey to take his hand. Let me just start with that. I wanted Rey to use the dark side of this film. I have wanted that since before, like, the film even came out. Anybody who's been watching me talk about this or heard me in Discord, that's an idea I've been pushing for a long time. Yeah, exactly, Carmen. Now, let me say that both characters disappointed me. Let me talk about the negative first. I always like to talk about the negative first. Both characters disappointed me because when Kylo... I'm like, yes, he's going to start this new thing. He's going to start this new organization. This is going to be great. And then, you know, she's reached, and she's already been at the point where she's trying to starting to reject things thanks to interaction with Luke. And I'm like, yes, this is going to be great. But then, what does Kylo say? Let's just burn it all and forge a new empire, a new order, and blah, blah. It was almost... like there was one line he said, which was almost word for word the same line Anakin said back in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And I'm like, no, No, come on, no. And then Rey, of course, is going to reject him because he says, let's just go rule the galaxy together. Come on. I really wanted that. I really wanted for him to want to start something new. And I wanted her to be okay with that. Like, I'd wanted that this whole film. In fact, there was even a scene, my sister can verify this, where I started doing this. Because I'm like, oh God, please let this happen. And it's the scene where the two of them were talking through the connection Snoke was making. And the interaction, by the way, I'm just sorry. I know I'm talking about the negative stuff, but the interaction between the two are phenomenal. Great chemistry between Kylo Ren and Rey in this film. But it's the scene where they finally touch hands, right? And I'm sitting there like, oh, come on, please. Just do it. Touch hands. It's going to be great. Ah, yes, awesome. Because I wanted that connection there. And then, of course, they dropped the ball, like I said. But no, I'm not shipping them at all. Actually, I don't want any romance there whatsoever. Because there's no need for romance there. You're just a confused child with a silly mask. Oh, God. Anyways, so, yeah, that's my big disappointment, is that Kylo went more Sith-y and she went more Jedi-y. And I was hoping for something a little bit new and different than that. That's the negative. Let's talk about the positives. First of all, I do personally think that Kylo wasn't lying when it comes to her parentage. There's several reasons I think that. The first reason is because of the fact that I want that. I'll be honest about it. I am biased. The second reason is because of her experience in the cave, which went on just a little bit too long, but not to the extent of like the casino planet. It was just a little slow, but it was a good breather moment otherwise. But the idea of her, I'm going to finally, who are my parents? And she sees herself. And I even say, you can ask my sister who was sitting right next to me. I said under my breath, because that was never the point. Yeah, the whole movie had hints of her knowing the truth. And then when Kylo actually says it, he's like, have you always known? And he doesn't say it like in the typical I'm a villain manipulating you tone. In fact, Kylo almost never talks to her that way. He, a couple times, I'm sorry, I hate to keep gushing, but the guy who played Kylo Ren was so freaking good in this. So good. Because he kept adopting this tone. He kept trying to adopt the mask. Not the literal one, the bam, bam. He kept trying to present himself as, I am the deep dark Lord. And then he would drop it. And his tone and his body posture and everything would notably change as he legitimately connected with Rey. He treats her as an equal. He treats her as a person. He even says that flat out. You're nobody. You're nothing. You're refuse. But not to me. And the fact, oh my God, the fact that when he asks her, so now that I've established my point, when he asks her, have you always known? Have you always known in your heart? There's no mask there at that point. He is asking her as a human being to another human being, have you always known that you were a nobody? That your parents were drunks and scum who traded you for booze? Oh my God, I love that scene. And yeah, he even admits that he is a monster. And yet he's so uncertain about it. And in fact, he couldn't shoot his mother. Remember? He's not the one who made that shot. Couldn't do it. Yeah, no Battlefront 2 connection, by the way. Sorry. But he couldn't do it. But that doesn't make him not evil. It makes him a person, an evil human. And I love the way they present him. It's so difficult for me to properly verbalize how much I loved Kylo Ren in this film. Just absolutely adored him. Everything, 100%, no complaints, no negatives, with the possible exception of the fact that he goes Sithy towards the end. Han, it took Han convincing him to kill him. Remember that? And it still was very, very difficult for him to do. I think Kylo Ren is a byproduct of Star Wars. Let me explain what I mean by this. In story, in lore, Star Wars has had this whole light-dark dichotomy for literally millennia. It's a cultural thing. It's a normal thing for people to see the dark side as evil and bad and wrong, as a monster, and light side is good and wonderful and awesome. The Jedi are the good guys, the Sith are the bad guys, the Republic are the good guys, the Emperor is the bad guys. This is so ground in at every level of Star Wars. Now, whether it's true or not is a lot more debatable. Whether it's true or not is a lot more gray and varies from case to case. But what we see in Kylo Ren is someone massively powerful in the dark side and everything that comes with that. Oh yeah, that was a great line. But yeah, I mean, let's make this clear. Kylo Ren is a villain. But I would say he is a very classic example of a Type 2. This is someone who was made into a monster by a broken system. This is why I said earlier the Jedi Order needs to die. This is why I said earlier this whole situation needs to go away, because Kylo Ren is a byproduct, a literal direct byproduct of Luke's problems on that and all the problems that led to Luke. Right? All of that. Well, I don't think he is just a victim. Let me make that clear as well. Okay, let's this is something that I've actually run into with people when it comes to fiction. So I'm going to talk about this for a second. I'm not going to spoil Witcher 3, but there's a certain character in Witcher 3 who has a lot of sympathetic backstory and a lot of fleshing out and a lot of development to why he is the way he is. He's still a villain. I bet a lot of you know what I'm talking about. He's still a villain. He's still a bad guy. He still chose to become a villain. But that does not change the fact that he was a victim, and the fact that he was a victim does not change the fact that he was a villain. They're not mutually exclusive. Kylo Ren is a villain who is a victim. He chose to be evil. And he chose to be evil because he was in a situation where he was victimized by this broken system. Both are part of his character arc. That's one of the things I like about him. Yeah, it's very true in real life, too. It is possible to be a victim and still be a horrible person. It's possible to be sympathetic and still not the good guy. Now, I agree. I think he did that internally. Yeah, Anakin, you know what? Anakin Skywalker is a great example of this. Anakin Skywalker was a victim. A huge victim. Oh my God. Anakin was screwed over by Palpatine, by the same broken system that we've just been talking about. Speaking of which, by the Jedi, by the Jedi Order, excuse me. Let me be more clear about this. You know, I can just go down the list. Almost every step of the list, Anakin was a huge victim. He still chose. He still made his own path. He was still a villain. Can Kylo be redeemed at this point? So I mentioned this earlier. I think Kylo can be redeemed, but not in the sense that he becomes a good guy. I think that Kylo Ren could still be a net positive influence on a broken galaxy by basically being a hot poker to a stab wound, if that analogy makes any sense. Right? You've taken emergency medical studies or seen movies where they do this in older times. You're in an emergency situation. You can't get to a hospital real quick. You've got a nice big open wound. Burn that sucker. Cauterize it now, right? That's kind of what I think Kylo Ren might be able to do. I'm not sure if they will, but I think that's something he could do. He could be a nice, horrible, damaging thing that could help a galaxy that is broken start fixing itself. Because the cauterization doesn't fix anything by itself, right? Now, I haven't talked about Rey a lot. Yeah, actually, Carbon. Now, I'm going to say something very unpopular. I don't think Rey was a Mary Sue in Episode 7. I don't. And I've heard people argue about that and discuss that for the last, what has it been, 2 years now? Something like that? I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I get a lot of people's points. I really do. But I don't agree, personally. And I still think that. I still think what we've got here is a good situation of a excellent character counterpoint to Kylo Ren, right? Lots of power, no skill. No skill. This woman had no idea what she was doing in this film. And it came across constantly. She had such a basic viewpoint of the galaxy. She was, of course, another victim of this broken system I mentioned. We need the Jedi. We need you to come back and save the galaxy. I'm sorry, what? That's such a childlike perspective on the galaxy. But I'm not making fun of that. That makes sense. This is a girl born on a frickin' dust ball of a heap, scavenging scrap to live. This is a girl who knows nothing about how the galaxy works. Of course she's going to have that perspective. Of course she's going to know exactly what's going, how things should be, right? Yeah, I like that. Okay, Jakku is pretty much nowhere. That was a nice line. Excuse me, you are right, Carbon. Forgive me. To survive. She did not have a life. I should clarify. I apologize. You should use my own terminology here. She was doing that just to survive. By the way, I know people have already pointed this out, but did anyone else notice that her fighting style was very much patterned after the fighting style Palpatine used? I forget the term. But I'm sure a lot of you noticed that. Again, people noticed that even just from the trailers, from analyzing the way she was fighting. But I digress. I don't know if there's anything significant to that. It's just true. But Rey, is it Form 4? Ataru? Anyways, like I said, I don't know the terminology. I agree, DeNoble. Is it Form 7? See, like I said, I don't know. I don't know. Anyways. So Rey goes to Luke, and she's like, fix this. You know, she's running home to Daddy, basically. Come on, fix this. No. Fix this? No. Fix this? No. Someone earlier in chat said that Luke learned more from Rey than Rey did from Luke. But it's worth noting that that Luke helped Rey to more properly connect with what the Force actually is. In fact, Luke probably gave what is, in my opinion, the best description of the Force I've ever heard in Star Wars. You know, death, life, peace, conflict, you know, and he just keeps giving these contrasts, and then he says, what's in between? What's in between all of that? I know we've had so many different definitions and descriptions of the Force over the years. I even spent 40 minutes talking about this in my KOTOR lore run. But I did love that description of the Force right there. Again, probably the best description I have ever heard of the Force right there. I love that. And Yeah, but what? Yeah, yeah, good stuff. Um, Agreed. Hourglass. Nothing else to add to that. Midichlorians, of course. You must be shown what the Force is. Anyways, so I'm trying to think how to properly describe this. Basically, Rey fails at almost everything she does in the whole film. She doesn't actually. I'm saying this wrong. Everything Rey tries to do, she fails at, and everything she unintentionally does, she succeeds at. Now, I have to admit, I don't really like that because that buys into the whole destiny idea, right? The whole, this is the proper path, I should just accept it rather than choosing my own path kind of a thing. And that is a thing in Star Wars. I just don't like it personally. I'm just being honest about my opinion. But she sets out to do several things and fails at 100% of them. She sets out to bring Luke back to save and defeat the First Order. Nope. She sets out to redeem Kylo Ren and bring it and turn him. She even says that word flat out, turn him. Fails at that miserably. The only times she actually succeeds is when basically by not actually trying to specifically go for something. And again, that's probably that whole fate, destiny thing. Oh yeah, by the way, failure is the greatest teacher is another awesome line in this film. Loved that line because it's true. It's true. Failure is a fantastic teacher. So she did manage to stop Snoke, basically. Or rather, she managed to be one of the many elements that led to the stopping of Snoke. She was capable of bringing out more in Kylo Ren than just the stupid Sith mentality or going down the whole thing, you know? Yeah, let's see. So Rey fails to turn Kylo. Kylo fails to turn Rey. Finn fails to turn off the tracker. Poe fails to save the rebel fleet. Snoke fails to kill Rey. Luke fails to train Rey. Hux fails to usurp power. Leia fails to escape properly. Again, fails to turn off the tracker. Laura Dern fails to evacuate them bounded secretly. Failure. I was happy about it, Gabe Martin. And I agree, Corrales, as it should be. It's great. I love it. Anyways, so back to Rey really quick. The moment where she really starts to actually do stuff is when she focuses on basically cutting losses. You notice that? It's true for several characters, actually. Poe Dameron, Rose, of course, Leia, just about everyone involved, Luke, just about everyone involved finally starts succeeding when they start basically not falling into the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is called a fallacy for a reason. And they started cutting their losses and starting pulling out and starting accepting defeat, because that is what the sunk cost fallacy is all about. Accepting the loss. It is when the main characters started accepting their losses, accepting their failures, and growing from it. That's when successes started happening. That's when Luke was able to tank. He was tanking and it was awesome. That's when Luke started tanking. That's when Rey started tanking. That's when Poe managed to get them out. That's when Finn managed to recover them back. That's when they managed to get on the ship and get out. Right? It was awesome. That's enough. I think you've got him, sir. And then he walks out. That was a great scene, by the way. The whole Luke tanking scene was fantastic. I'm not sure what I think of that Dark Star. It doesn't bother me that much, to be honest with you, because it was still relatively low tier. I mean, just little bits of water, and that's about it, right? Or the dice, which actually, remember, vanished. So they weren't actually there. That was just a projection. I agree, Formosan. It's true, it could have not been real water. I'm not sure. Hux was actually really good in this film. How did Luke die? I've actually heard that debated quite a bit, believe it or not. I need to rewatch Empire Strikes Back and Return Dark Star because I didn't actually recognize the dice either. And I wasn't the only one. Now, it's funny you say that, Hourglass. I gotta be honest with you guys. I just realized I wrote a weird song for this. Hang on. I think Luke pulled a Tella. That is literally what my first thought was when I was sitting there in the theater watching this. He turned his HP into MP, meditating in the focal point spot of the island, the balance point between the dark and the light, and trying to extend himself as absolutely much as possible. And you notice he did a force projection that was so powerful that there wasn't like the usual signs of it. Obviously, again, there was no footprints, but for the most part, he was basically there. And that took a lot out of him. And I like that. I like that it took so much for Luke to accomplish what he did. Helps bring him down a little bit, you know? And again, yeah, when he finished it, he falls over. He's barely functional. He was just, practically dead. So it makes sense to me that he was very low in health and very injured. And it's also worth noting he was at peace. One of the interesting things about Jedi, if you notice, is any Jedi who dies at peace vanishes in the same manner. It is the Jedi who do not die at peace that leave corpses. This is consistently shown in almost every work in Star Wars. Yeah, they leave no body. Can a Sith die in peace? That is a very good question. To my knowledge, none have. I would say it's possible, personally. But then again, I should clarify my statement a little bit. I think a dark side user could die at peace, to be more clear about my terminology. I don't know, Darkstar, at this point. Well, Qui-Gon, I personally think that the Forced Ghost thing is a separate category of things, my opinion. But you'll notice Qui-Gon did not die at peace. So he didn't fade. As Darkrai said, there was one who was in the old EU, and I forget what his name was. Oh, that was such a great line. I know I already said that, but that was such a great line. You strike me down in anger, I will always be with you, just like your father. I love that line. Exactly, Saltier. I'm running through the film in my head really quick, trying to think of anything we missed. Well, Harriet, I mean, Yoda was still teaching. Oh yeah, I haven't actually talked about the hyperspace gun. Let me share two things really quick. First of all, let me just say that the hyperspace jump into a thing is incredibly awesome. I know it looked kind of anime, but the way they showed the freeze frame of the fleet getting wrecked, just from the shockwave of a ship going to hyperspace directly into another ship, was incredibly awesome, in my opinion. It was wonderfully, beautifully presented. The ramming speed, that was great. The moment, by the way, it cuts to her and she's seeing them fire on the transports, I'm like, she's going to ram them. I didn't think she was going to ram them at light speed. I'm like, she's going to ram them. Now, that was almost a little too effective, if you know what I mean. I mean, God's sakes, if that If that was a thing, why? I mean, oh God, the Death Star's approaching. All right, get one of our cruisers in here. I mean, God's sakes, right? Now, let me add, let me add something because I want to add a little reality to this one. The silence was great, except for the guy who told everyone to shut up, but I already talked about that. It can be argued that you need a certain level of mass and power to make that happen. In other words, it could be argued that only a cruiser could pull that off. Like a transport wouldn't really make it work, or a fighter definitely wouldn't work. Now, let's be clear physics don't agree with that. If you accelerate one grain of sand to the speed of light, it's going to literally cause a nuclear detonation. So let's ignore physics for a second. Let's assume that it has to be something big enough to make it work, okay? Let's assume it has to be a cruiser. Okay? We need to start with this. Otherwise, this is something we can't even actually be discussing, right? The argument could be very well leveled, and this even ties into the overall theme of the setting, that if it has to be something that big and that expensive and that powerful, then it's usually not worth it, right? They don't have that many cruisers. They don't have that many big ships. They don't have that many frigates, right? The only times it would be worth using would be on something very, very worth it, like the Supremacy. So the Supremacy would be a perfect target for that. The Death Stars would have been a perfect target for that. The Star Killer would have been a perfect target for that. But I can believe the idea that, assuming we adjust physics, as I mentioned earlier, that this is the kind of thing that you can't just do. For those of you who remember, Mass Effect 3 actually talked about this exact concept. Mass Effect 3, in some of the better parts of Mass Effect 3, one of the things that was being discussed was the possibility of just ramming Reapers left and right, and it was considered to be such a Pyrrhic victory, even though it was working, that it would be destroying more of us than it was for her, right? Anyways. Oh, I'm pretty sure it was atomized Volcanto. Now, so if we're presuming that, it's also worth noting that, I mean, there's just, I'm sorry, I should just take back. We don't actually know full details of exactly what is involved in ramming someone at light speed. For anyone very invested in the EU, you know that kind of thing will, even ignoring the ramming, will completely destroy a ship's ability to properly function. I mean, God's sakes, there's actually a plot point in one of the earliest works of the EU, the Thrawn trilogy, that just doing an emergency hyperspace jump, not anything else, just an emergency jump, will fry that hyperdrive. That it's not actually going to function properly, that you're basically critically destroying your ship or literally destroying your ship. And that's just for an unplanned, unmapped hyperspace jump, right? The movies and the books have actually gone very well out of their way to explain how hyperspace is actually very, very, very dangerous. That is the kind of thing you need to be very, very, very competent with. That being said, as Men Darkness pointed out, they've already kind of violated how hyperspace works in Force Awakens because they hyperspace in atmosphere, which is insane, you know? So, I'm not excusing it. I want to make that clear. It could be explained, but it's the kind of thing that it was so awesome, I'm willing to let it go. But it is still eyebrow raising, the whole hyperspace bullet thing. And God, I just want to see that scene again. You know what I mean? I really do. I just want to see. Yeah, I do agree with that, Anthony. Yes. Yeah, interdictors are actually canon now, so I mean, you know. Yeah, a definite rule of cool moment, absolutely. I'm okay with it because it's very cool, but it was a rule of cool moment. Which one, Mike Romano? Or do you mean the fact that people could see light speed death rays from other systems? I actually complained about that. It was a minor complaint, but a complaint I had with The Force Awakens. The idea of the fact that all of The Force Awakens seems to happen like very, very locally, you know? And what's funny is Last Jedi kind of feels the same way, doesn't it? Like, for God's sakes, they actually go at sublight speeds and reach a planet or a moon or whatever from whatever previous base they were at. Oh, but they also have time within 18 hours to warp over to the casino planet, do stuff, and then warp back. It all felt very local. But as I mentioned earlier, I feel like they've been having trouble portraying the scope and scale properly in this film. I gotta be honest. I gotta be honest. When they first did the, like, so, you know, they're talking to Admiral Purple Hair Melodrama, and they're saying, okay, they start coughing. Excuse me. When they're like, you know, it's very clear someone has to stay behind and pilot the thing. And Admiral Purple Hair's like, it's going to be me. What I thought they were going to do was have Carrie, have Leia Organa be like, yeah, okay. You know, stun her or something. Basically force her onto the ship and then go and ram it herself instead of letting her do it. Now, that's not because I want Leia to die. Let me make that clear. It's just because the situation we're now in, thanks to real life circumstances, it would have been nice to go ahead and try to shift that around, right? Make her make the sacrifice. In fact, I actually kind of kept waiting for one last sacrifice by Leia to be happen. It never happened. She lived through the whole film. It's like, God damn it, what? I'm not sure what you guys are thinking on that one. I hope you thought this one out. Anyways. But yeah, I'm out of things to talk about at this point. So I'm not sure. Let's see. So we talked about that. We talked about that. This is tied into the previous. The porgs are cute. Om nom nom. This ties into my previous complaint about the spaceship battle, but they warped in with their destroyers, right? Which are big freaking ships. Those are bigger than ISDs. And then they warp in with the Dreadnought, which, as I already said, is stupid. And then the Resistance, very slowly, I might add, starts to fight the Dreadnought. What was the rest of the fleet doing? Seriously. It's not like they didn't have time to do something. Like, seriously, I felt like so many of the Star Destroyers that the First Order kept wielding in the fleets that were there physically were just there for set dressing. It's like, do something. Jesus Christ, have you never done fleet maneuvers? Go do something. Go. I think Luke was just super weak. Not only being cut off from the Force, but remember, she has recent experience in fighting and was actively fighting to survive. Remember, she was good with that bow staff even before any Force or anything ever entered her life, right? Luke hasn't fought anyone in a really long time and has cut himself off from the Force. So it actually would make sense to me that the old terrible guy who has no practice, I mean, there's a reason that saying exists. If you do not use it, you will lose it, right? So that made sense to me, that Luke would just not be able to keep up at all with that one. Oh yeah, that's another interesting thing. You'll notice the resistance sent out the distress beacon, and then nothing happened. Yeah, I know, right, Vertexen? That's another thing, by the way. I really hate to raise my eyebrow at this, but what the hell is going on with one bomber being able to take out a dreadnought? I think I've made my point about the ships. I'm going to stop talking about it. They misrepresented the ships and the fleets and the tactics. Moving on. Yes, I liked Luke's wink to C-3PO. That was awesome. They did, Carbon. That's true. I do have to admit, like I said earlier, Episode 9 is basically a nice big blank sheet of paper right now. Who the hell knows what they're doing with Episode 9? You and I both know that's not a fair comparison, Carbon. Oh, what did I think Ray learned from Luke? Well, obviously, the nature of the Force. But I think Ray got a nice insight into basically the failures of the past. One thing that I've said many, many times about EU Star Wars is that Yoda's biggest mistake was he did not explain to Luke how much he had failed and how much the Jedi Order had failed. Yoda taught Luke many things, but he did not impart that wisdom onto him. And if you remember from the EU books leading up to Hand of Thrawn Duology, Luke repeated the same mistakes because he never knew. He never knew those same mistakes. Nobody ever told him. And all that data from the Clone Wars era was lost or they're destroyed. Granted, more of an out-of-character thing than an in-character thing, but still, right? Luke was open about his failure, about the history, about the loss. That's his third lesson, Saldir. We failed. The Jedi Order failed. That was a great scene, Dark Star. The Luke and R2-D2 scene was great. R2 walks over, hey, and starts showing the Obi-Wan Kenobi thing, and Luke's just like, I did notice the Knights of Ren weren't mentioned in the movie. I admit I actually had the mental impression that the Knights of Red were the Knights of Ren in this film. I don't actually know if that's true or not. So, I don't know. Was that the second lesson? I thought the second lesson was all about, like, the Jedi needing to... I guess that could... I suppose you could argue that. I suppose you could argue that those two things coincide. Well, I admit I am biased, Ulmerich, because I hate the Jedi Order. But that does not change my opinion of the fact that the Jedi Order did, in fact, fail miserably. Now, you might be like, why do you hate the Jedi Order? Because I don't like anything that gets dogmatic to the point of encouraging someone to not think. If there's one philosophy I adhere to, this is in real life too, it's that you should think. You should actually think about something and actually put real thought and real concept and real time into something. It's one of the reasons I talk. It's one of the reasons I've been talking for 2 hours now about Star Wars. Think. Dogma is by definition the opposite of think. And I don't mean religious dogma. That's not what I mean. I mean when you adhere to a strict set of rules, and this is the rules, the end. That's dogma. That's not thinking. That's why I'm against the Jedi Order. Not just the prequel Jedi Order, but the Old Republic Jedi Order. And to be completely blunt, Luke's Jedi Order in the EU did the same goddamn thing. So that's why I wanted to explain my opinion on that. That could be Pyro. I don't know. The symbol in the middle original temple, I don't know what I think of that. I haven't decided yet. See you around, Formosan. That's called stupidity. Lol. The Imperial Knights from the EU? That's in an era I don't really like all that much, so I don't really know about it that much. No, there's absolutely wisdom to that idea, Ulmerich. Absolutely, there needs to be some kind of careful, guided, measured way of helping people to learn how to use the Force and to learn how to grow and work with it, right? I mean, God's sakes. You talking about the Mark Hamill quote that's been misquoted and misrepresented for like the last month and a half, Lucian Haas? In which case, I've already given my opinion on it in my question. And I agree with Carbon. The Jedi Order's biggest failing is that they were not teaching. They were not indoctrinating. They could have taught. I mean, I have had the opinion for many years that if when Anakin, when he was faced with all these troubles and all these doubts and all these fears, if he had reached out to one of his Jedi Masters like Yoda and said help, and they had helped him, I think we would have had a very, very, very different series of movies. Because if you remember that scene, Yoda doesn't help him. I remember that scene because it's actually probably one of the most irritating scenes. I shouldn't say irritating, it's the wrong way to put it. It's one of the scenes that just kind of hurts a bit more than any other scene. I think it's in episode 2. Yoda just gives him the party line. He just basically pulls out the book and said, "Here's what you should do." Oh, help him, Yoda. Jesus Christ. It's telling that the biggest opponent to Anakin turning to the dark side was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, it was episode 3. Forgive me. Oh, you're right, because he had the hair. One of the biggest opponents to Anakin turning to the dark side was Obi-Wan Kenobi, probably the one person who could have really interfered with Palpatine's plans. And Palpatine was off planet. Excuse me, I'm saying Obi-Wan was off planet. How convenient. In fact, it's actually funny that there's a really, really dumb line that Anakin says, which is in episode 2. I know this one, where he says, "I think the Jedi are encouraged to love, not restricted from it." It's a dumb line, and it's said to impress a girl. But I like that thought. The Jedi being encouraged to love, the Jedi being encouraged to help people and reach out to people and care about people. That resonated with me in a weird way. And I've always, and obviously, because I'm talking about it years later, episode 2 came out, what, like 15 years ago? It's resonated with me ever since. The idea that if the Jedi had truly been taught to love, not romantically, just to care, we might have seen a very, very different setting. You know? See you around, Matt Darton. I know the quest you're talking about, Ulmerich, and I agree. That was great. That was a great quest. I know exactly that quest you're talking about. Oh, who knows, Roximus? I have heard, word for word, I have heard people say that episode 8 is worse than episode 1. I don't even know what to make of that. I think that's just hyperbole, to be honest with you. See you around, Larimbus. Yeah, recency bias. It's the Final Fantasy thing all over again. Final Fantasy 13 sucks because it just came out. Final Fantasy 15 sucks because it just came out. Final Fantasy 12 sucks because it just came out. It's true in everything. It's true in every franchise. It's very, very common. I guarantee you, when insert new game or film of insert franchise you care about come out, there are people who will say it sucks because it just came out. I guarantee it. Very normal. Lol, Mugen. It is Corrales. Some of you may remember when I first started streaming, some of the very first streams I ever did. This is like 5 years ago now. I made the comment that there were so many people on YouTube at the time. Is this still true? And on Twitch at the time who were just overwhelmingly negative and toxic. And I didn't want to be one of those people. I have ranted on my show, but I don't get the excess negativity. God's sakes. You know? Anyways. So I've been thinking about how I would rank this one. Let me go ahead and say something very controversial. I don't actually like A New Hope that much. Now let me explain this real quick before you kill me. Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope is a good film, and it is absolutely it was the miracle film. Excuse me. I talked about this many times on my show. I talked about this in my rumination of A New Hope. It was a luck-based, absolutely should not have happened miracle that it was as successful as it was, and we have gotten many, many decades of wonderful fiction and also garbage as a consequence of it. A New Hope should not have been as good as it was. New Hope should not have been as popular as it was, but it was, and now we have Star Wars. But I can still acknowledge something as being a monumental, groundbreaking thing, and still think it is worse than more modern works. That doesn't mean I don't like A New Hope. That doesn't mean I think A New Hope didn't revolutionize cinematography and the very concept of the film industry in many ways, as many, many people have discussed over the years. But when you get down to it, in my opinion, A New Hope is not that great of a film compared to the other Star Wars films. Now, obviously, it's better than Episode 1 and Episode 2, but I would probably put it at the number 3 slot at the bottom there, personally. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is to explain some other things, because for me, there's like the truly amazing Star Wars films. Empire obviously sits very high up there. Thank you, Zenkadek. Yeah, no kidding, Preacher. Ruby glasses, right? So, hell, I even have been guilty of the pedestal thing myself. It's one of the reasons I have reanalyzed FF6 so many times, to prevent myself from doing that. Anyways, Empire, Rogue One, Return of the Jedi. There's the top of the tier for me. Now, Return of the Jedi actually slipped to the bottom of that list when I rewatched it and fully analyzed it, because there are some very significant flaws in Return of the Jedi. In fact, those flaws are actually quite glaring in Return of the Jedi. But Return of the Jedi still does have truly amazing storytelling and truly amazing cinematography in several significant sections of it. So it still is very high up on the list for me. It's just not as high as I used to think of it. Rogue One is, of course, phenomenal. Rogue One was just the sleeper hit. I had no idea I was going to like that film as much as I did. I've watched that several times, and goddamn, it was amazing. Empire, don't really have to say much about Empire. Empire is one of those rare treats for me, because it is very rare when I go through a work with full analysis mode, and I like it even more than I already did. That is a true rarity. And Empire was a film that was like that for me. Going through Empire with full analysis mode made that film shine even more than I already thought it would. Great, great film. But that's the top, right? Rogue One, Empire, Return. What's below that? Well, Revenge of the Sith, for me, Episode 3. Now, I know I get a lot of hate for that opinion. Let me go ahead and clarify that a little bit. Revenge of the Sith is basically 2 films. It is a very bad film with awkward, cringy moments, and it is an absolutely freaking amazing film with amazing character moments. Revenge of the Sith is kind of another Return of the Jedi, because it's got some really bad, but its good is incredibly good, right? It's got that contrast thing going on again. And there are some really, really, really great character moments and really great presentations. Revenge of the Sith is basically Palpatine's movie in many ways, and Vader's movie in many ways. And then Obi-Wan fights Grievous and it's stupid, but then there's some really good stuff, you know. Yeah, I've had that exact same problem, Ruximus. So I would put Revenge of the Sith at the number 4 slot. And then it gets tricky, because if you'll notice, I've only got 2 films left. Force Awakens and this one. If you asked me right now where I would put The Last Jedi, I would probably put it at the number 5 slot. So that would be Empire, Rogue, Return, Revenge, Last. Followed by Force Awakens, A New Hope, Attack of the Clones, and Phantom Menace. That would be my rough order off the top of my head right now. Now that's ridiculous, Darkrai. Even Phantom Menace had good in it. Why Clones over Phantom Menace? You know, I've actually... Anybody who watched my ruminations know that I actually changed my mind about that back then. I have since rewatched the prequel trilogy and changed my mind again. And I think the best... I'm going to stab you, Pyro. I think the best way for me to explain why I don't like Phantom Menace is the dialogue. The script of Phantom Menace is gutter trash. I'm sorry. That is my opinion. But of the many things that Episode 1 has, some good, some bad, the thing that absolutely destroys Episode 1 for me is the script. The dialogue is garbage, and the set pieces and the interaction of scenes and the presentation of things is just bad. And it's very, very difficult for me to enjoy a film that has that terrible of a script. There are some really good parts about Phantom Menace. A lot of us tend to forget that. A lot of us tend to look at Phantom Menace and just assume it's all terrible. It's not. But the overwhelming, constant presentation over and over and over of that script, it's something that's hard to avoid when it's something so omnipresent throughout the whole work. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, by the way, let me say another controversial opinion. Jar Jar's not racist. I'm just going to lay that one down there. Boom. I forgive me for not remembering exact moments, but there are several points in Episode 1 where the dialogue is that kind of thing that people don't actually know how to... That's not how people talk, right? That's not how people speak. That's not how dialogue works. It doesn't even feel like someone saying something from a script. It feels like a first draft situation. For those of you not aware, so I brought up the Jar Jar thing because several people were saying, you know, does anyone even like Jar Jar? Is Jar Jar a good character, etc.? Let me go ahead and say that I do not like Jar Jar as a character, and I can even explain why. But there are several people who fixated all of their hate on Jar Jar by saying that Jar Jar was racist. Ahmed Best himself has expressed many times how aggravating it was to be playing a character that several people would say was racist. I mean, God, come on. So that's why I brought that up. I'm actually really happy a lot of people in chat have been are agreeing with me on the idea that Jar Jar is not racist, because that is legitimately aggravating to hear people try to say that. Excuse me. But so let's talk about, you know what? Let's just do a quick thought exercise. Can we do this just for my sake? Right at the end of the video here. Because I need to go get some lunch soon. Then I'll probably stream some more. Let's talk about some good stuff about episode 1. What's some stuff you really liked about episode 1? I would prefer the why, by the way. Just, why was it good? That's always what I'm big about, Why was it good? I'm seeing several people saying things related to the music. I agree about the pod race, by the way. The pod race served a story function, but if you ignore everything else about the episode, if you ignore the pacing, if you ignore the fact that it drags, you ignore the fact that it wasn't really presented, the pod race in and of itself was actually really, really good. Like I'm serious, slice out the pod race, pull it out, and just watch that scene sometime. It's good. Good directing, good build of tension, good presentation of visual effects, good character moments in it, good music presentation. Of course, it's John Williams, but he knocked it out of the park with that, in my opinion. The pod race was good. Duel of the Fates. The duel... The duel between... I'm trying to think, how do I say this? Let's talk about Duel of the Fates. Obviously, John Williams, I have actually said before, and I've also gotten some flack for this, that in my opinion, John Williams is in the running for one of the best music composers of all time. I've gotten a lot of flack for that opinion, but that opinion has not gone away over time. I still feel that way legitimately. So John Williams did very much nail many musical moments in episode 1. John Williams is the kind of guy who will weave his music into the film and absolutely make it an integral part of the film. It's one of the things he's really good at. And so there are several moments where the music absolutely fulfilled the scene, absolutely connected the scenes in ways that otherwise would be incredibly lacking, even with good music there. I bring to this because of the Duel of the Fates thing. Now, obviously, a lot of people tend to very much like the lightsaber duel between Darth Maul, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Qui-Gon Jinn. Let me just go ahead and say that while I do have complaints about that duel, there was some very good visual storytelling in addition to a cool lightsaber fight. I got an example for you right now. There's the scene where they're dueling through the force field area, which makes no sense, and the fields get in the way of them, right? You remember that? That little bit of that scene was great. That had power and impact because nobody said a word, but in that moment, we knew those characters. Qui-Gon, what's the first thing he does? Within a second, he turns off his lightsaber and starts meditating. Maul, you can see that he's still got the adrenaline going. He tries the force field once. All right, turns his lightsaber off and starts pacing. Obi-Wan is back there, and he's getting pumped too. He's not quite to the same extent as Maul, but he's like, I'm getting ready. That was a great scene. No dialogue, but it perfectly encapsulated all three characters and the different perspectives of the three most common mindsets of the Force. And it did it very, very well, in my opinion. See you around Blue of Alex. So, that was good. Now, I will go ahead and say that the duel, pretty much up to that part, was basically lackluster because it had no emotion, it had no power to it. Rewatch Empire Strikes Back sometimes and watch the duel between Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest lightsaber duels in the history of the franchise. Probably the second. It's not because it's flashy and super awesome, though. It's well choreographed, but it's because every second has oomph behind it. Every second has power of character or visual presentation or serving a story purpose. There was a lot, yeah, there's a lot, tons of emotion in that fight, and it never stopped. That fight could have been pathetic or cheesy or whatever, but instead it had all the power it needed. Yeah, I could probably spend several hours just analyzing the duel between Anakin and between Luke and Vader. And yeah, the first best duel is the one in Return of the Jedi, which, as was just pointed out, wasn't even really a duel. Oh, and by the way, just really quick, the third best duel in my opinion was the one at the end of Revenge of the Sith, but I gotta admit, the Rey and Kylo one might surpass that. I'd have to keep watching that. Either way, Athel, I think you agree that both of those succeed for the same reason, right? Right? Because there was oomph there. There was reason for fighting. There was power and emotion into why these two people are fighting. And it carried through in everything. One of my favorite moments, if I could just pull out one slice of the Empire Strikes Back duel really quick here. There's a moment where Luke advances and goes, "Ch ch ch." Vader is basically not moving. Great props to the actor. I can never remember his name, but the guy who physically played Vader needs more credit because he did a great job too in the original trilogy. He's just standing there, effortlessly deflects it, and then lazily returns his saber back to the on guard point. David Prowse, thank you. David Prowse deserves lots of credit and recognition for Vader. He really does. So that little moments like that is awesome. I'm sorry, I need a drink. I'll be right back. Getting back to episode 1 really quick, though. One of the reasons I bring up that... Yeah, there we go. One of the reasons I bring up the lightsaber duel between Maul and the other two is because up until that bit with the force field bits, it was empty. There was no significance to it. There was no power behind it, right? It was cool. It was very cool. Very well choreographed. Very awesome. It was our actual first real look at the dual saber tool. Excuse me. But it was devoid. There was nothing there. If I can... I don't want to spoil an unrelated work. It reminds me of a scene in FF15. That's all I'm going to say about that. I would say Star Wars, personally, Berserkero. Does every lightsaber duel have to have an emotional impact? Oh, does it? No, yeah, you said right. No, of course not. There's nothing wrong with having a cool lightsaber duel. But, for me, my opinion, my preferences, the lightsaber duel that has power behind it is going to be way better than a lightsaber duel that's just cool, right? I actually have an example of a lightsaber duel that only had a little bit of power behind it, but was very, very cool. And it's actually among my favorite lightsaber duels. It's Palpatine versus Darth Maul, and I can't even remember his name. It's in the show. It's in the Clone Wars show. It does have some story relevance. It's not a completely vacuous lightsaber duel, but it's basically just Palpatine. Thank you, Savage. It's between Palpatine, Savage, and Maul, and Palpatine just absolutely destroys the other two. And that was a great duel. It was a great moment, and it was awesome. It doesn't need to have some big mega plot significance to be enjoyable, but the one that is awesome and has plot significance is always going to beat that out, in my opinion. For those of you who have not seen it, you can just watch it on YouTube. I'm not even kidding. Just go YouTube, Sidious versus Maul, and you should be able to find it, and it will be there, and it'll be awesome. Because, yeah, it's a great fight. Best lightsaber fights of all times. Well, I mentioned one really good one right now. So I kind of mentioned it earlier, but the Revenge of the Sith duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan basically is the first half of that duel was absolutely amazing. Now, I've been made fun of for that opinion because usually when I say, oh my gosh, that is an amazing duel, the first thing everyone says is, oh, you liked the high ground thing, right? Or, oh, I now have the high ground. That wasn't part of the duel. I mean, I'm sorry, it wasn't. Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting through the facility. Bam, 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 bam. Just beat after beat after beat nonstop, pretty much until the lava got involved. That was all effectively one nice, cohesive duel. And it was incredibly awesome, very well choreographed, actually done by the actors. I don't know if you've ever seen the behind-the-scenes stuff. The two of them practiced that fight for days just to get that pattern and that beat and that tempo down. And, of course, lots and lots of power and emotion and oomph and character drama behind all of that. This is Obi-Wan versus Anakin Skywalker, for God's sakes. And they'd been building up to this... Well, they've been trying to build up to this the whole trilogy, but they had been succeeding at building up to this the entire third film. That was great. And then the lava kind of started getting involved. And then it just kind of started to drag a little bit. And then he had the high ground. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, Preacher. It was a fight between brothers who had grown together in war. And it showed. Again, great visual presentation. In my opinion, the truly best lightsaber fights are the ones that, in addition to having, being cool and having emotional power behind them, are the ones that are great visual presentations. They're showing something visually. I like that. Anyways. Ewan McGregor did a good job with what he had. I'll admit that, absolutely. I kind of liked it, Anthony, honestly. Especially since the fight with Rey and Kylo against the Praetorian Guards, whatever they were, that was great. That was a great fight. And of course, it was also a crowning moment of awesome, given what had just happened. And again, there was obviously some significant emotion and power in it too. So it was significant in addition to being very cool. The only thing that would have capped it off is if, he hadn't gone the way he had and she had taken his hat. But I've already talked about that. I'm not sure, Unicorn Puncher. I'm not sure. I suppose that's actually good enough. I'm going to go ahead and rest my throat for a bit. I might not actually continue streaming today. I really need to get some recording done, and I'm never going to get recording done if my throat never gets better. I've been having trouble talking for like 4 days now. So, the Clone Wars TV show? It is on the docket. Hang on, let me cut off the local recording. So for those of you watching on YouTube, farewell forever.